You know, when you hear the name Einstein, what comes to mind? Probably the crazy hair, the iconic genius, right? The man who figured out the universe. But his story, it doesn't start with a flash of brilliance. Not even close. It actually starts with his own family being seriously worried about him.
Much too fat, much too fat. I'm not kidding. That was his grandmother's first reaction the moment he was born. See, he had this unusually large, kind of misshapen head, and for his family, that wasn't a sign of some future genius. It was a real cause for concern.
And this, right here, is the real heart of his early story. We're going to peel back the layers of the myth. You know, the idea that he just showed up fully formed. Instead, we're going to discover the difficult, often frustrating childhood that actually forged the mind that would one day change the world.
As a little kid, Albert was so quiet that his parents genuinely thought he might have a learning disability. He didn't even start talking until he was almost 4 years old, which earned him the family nickname, the Dopey One. And even then, he had this strange little habit of whispering every sentence to himself before he'd actually say it out loud.
But for this quiet, so-called dopey one, something really clicked when he was 5. He was sick in bed, and his dad gave him a simple magnetic compass, probably just to keep him occupied. And that tiny, simple object, it would spark a lifelong obsession that would literally change the course of science forever.
This was the question that just absolutely mesmerized him. He'd turn the compass every which way, but that needle held steady, always pointing north, like it was being guided by some invisible hand. For a 5-year-old kid, this was pure magic. He couldn't see anything touching it, but some huge, unseen force was clearly in control.
Years and years later, he said that moment left a deep and lasting impression on him. The idea that there are invisible forces governing our world, that there's some kind of hidden order behind everything we see, well, that became the central mystery he knew he had to solve. The seed was planted.
As he got older, that quiet nature started turning into a pretty fierce defiance. He entered the German school system in the 1880s, and you have to understand, this world was super rigid, almost militaristic. It was all about rote memorization and never questioning authority. For a mind like his, a mind obsessed with hidden forces and deep questions, it was absolute torture.
And this really shows you the fundamental problem. On one side, you have a school system that demands blind obedience. On the other, you have a mind that just could not stop asking why. He was constantly at odds with his teachers, who didn't see his curiosity as a gift, they saw it as a discipline problem. And this rebellion wasn't just some phase, it was the exact trait that would later let him overthrow scientific dogma.
So, while his teachers are labeling him a poor student, his intellectual life at home is just exploding. He taught himself algebra by the time he was 12, he devoured a geometry textbook in a single summer, he even started exploring calculus, all by himself. Not for a grade, but for the sheer joy of it. He actually called that geometry book his sacred little geometry book. This is what he was hearing from his teachers. Just imagine the weight of that. And you have to combine it with the massive stress at home, where his father's business was failing. The pressure on young Albert was just crushing him from all sides. And when he turned 15, it all just came to a head. His family's business finally went bankrupt. They decided to pack up and move to Italy for a fresh start, and they left Albert behind in Munich all alone to finish school in a system he absolutely despised. This timeline really shows you just how fast things fell apart. In the span of a year, he drops out of school, he renounces his German citizenship because he hated its militarism, and then, in a desperate move to get into a top university, he takes the entrance exam and fails. It was just one crisis after another.
But here's the crucial twist. While he failed the exam overall, his scores in math and physics were exceptional, like off the charts. The examiners at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic saw a spark. They basically told him, hey, go finish your secondary school and then come back and try again.
And that piece of advice, it changed everything. He enrolled in this small, progressive school over in Aarau, Switzerland. The rigid discipline of Germany was just gone. And in this new, nurturing environment, Albert really began to awaken.
I mean, just look at the difference here. The school in Aarau was everything the German system wasn't. It valued the very things that got him into trouble before: his curiosity, his creativity, his independent mind. He was finally in a place that actually fit him.
And he just blossomed. He lived with one of his teachers' families, he was hiking in the mountains, playing his violin. He was happy. And this personal happiness wasn't some distraction from his work. It was the fertile ground that gave his mind the freedom to wander, to dream, and ask the biggest questions you could possibly imagine.
And it was here, at just 16 years old, that he asked himself a question that would change the world. This wasn't for homework. It was just a daydream, a thought experiment that would set the course for the next decade of his life and ultimately lead to his theory of relativity.
So here's the paradox that completely gripped him. According to all the physics of his day, if you could travel at the speed of light, a light wave right next to you should look frozen, like a stationary oscillating field. But something in his gut, his intuition, told him that was impossible. That light, by its very nature, could not be seen as standing still. This teenage daydream, it was his first revolutionary challenge to the absolute foundations of physics.
A year later, at 17, he retook the entrance exam, and this time he passed. He was officially a university student at the Zurich Polytechnic. The struggles of his early school days were finally over.
So now, he's a young man armed not just with knowledge, but with a burning, world-altering question about the very nature of reality. But his time at university, and the frustrating years that followed, well, they would bring a whole new set of challenges. The path from a struggling student to a revolutionary thinker was far from over. His greatest trials and his greatest triumphs were still ahead. So that's the question we'll tackle next time. How does an unknown patent clerk in Bern, Switzerland, completely upend our understanding of space, time, and the entire universe?